What if I told you that the most expensive diamond choker could strangle its owner faster than the executioner's hemp rope? Outwardly, their lives seemed like a fairy tale come to life, where every day was filled with balls, the rustle of silk, and the sparkle of family tiaras. But behind the heavy velvet curtains of New York mansions and London estates lay a very different, frightening reality. It was a world where one wrong glance, one missed visit, or one careless word could turn a socialite into an outcast, whose name was erased from memory as if she had never existed. Women of that era were hostages to their own reputations, living dolls whose value was determined by a successful marriage and the ability to remain silent when their hearts were breaking with pain. We are used to seeing only the facade of the Gilded Age. Luxurious dresses, marble staircases, and endless receptions that amaze the imagination with their grandeur. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how one fatal mistake could destroy a centuries-old dynasty and why wealth became the cruelest curse for these women. Are you ready to learn the truth about how a simple piece of paper could destroy a person's life without a single shot being fired? At the end of the 19th century, New York society lived by cruel and unbreakable rules set by one woman, Mrs. Astor. She created the famous 400 list, which included only those who, in her opinion, were worthy of being in the ballroom of her mansion. Getting on this list guaranteed social status, respect, and a bright future for the children of the chosen lucky ones. But not being on it was tantamount to social death, turning the richest people into invisible beings who were ignored even by their own servants. Every morning began with anxious anticipation of the mail, when the butler brought a stack of invitation envelopes on a silver tray. Women would search through the thick paper with bated breath, looking for the coveted coat of arms that would confirm their right to exist in this world. If there was no invitation to the main ball of the season, it meant the collapse of all hopes and complete isolation from society. Preparing for the ball, if an invitation did arrive, turned into an exhausting marathon that lasted for weeks and required superhuman efforts. Dresses were ordered from Paris for fabulous sums of money, and each fitting lasted for hours, while seamstresses adjusted the corsets to such an extent that it became almost impossible to breathe. The fabrics were so heavy, embroidered with pearls and gold thread, that every movement required the physical endurance of a soldier. On the day of the reception, the nervous tension in the house reached its peak, electrifying the air and forcing the servants to walk on tiptoe. The lady of the house sat in front of the mirror for hours while her maids arranged elaborate hairstyles and fastened heavy jewelry that weighed down her head and neck. Her eyes revealed not excitement about the upcoming festivities, but an animal fear of doing something wrong, of making a mistake, or wearing the wrong jewelry. The carriage ride to the Astor Mansion was like a journey to the scaffold, where each clatter of the wheels counted down the seconds to the moment of truth. Inside the carriage, there was an icy silence. The couple did not look at each other, immersed in their thoughts about the possible consequences of the evening. They knew that any wrong move would be noticed, discussed, and possibly cause their downfall. Entering the ballroom was a real test, as hundreds of eyes turned to the new arrivals, assessing every inch of their attire and every movement. They had to keep their backs perfectly straight and smile discreetly and warmly, even if their corsets dug into their ribs, causing sharp pain. One awkward movement, too loud a laugh, or an incorrect bow could become the subject of gossip for the next few months. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about a system where a person's life depended on a piece of paper with an invitation? Write about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new stories. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of the fairy tale weddings of the past? At the end of the 19th century, a strange and tragic union arose between American money and British titles, which was called the era of dollar princesses. The British aristocracy owned vast estates and ancient castles, but their bank accounts were empty and the roofs of their ancestral homes were leaking. American nouveau riche, on the other hand, had enormous fortunes but no access to the upper echelons of old Europe. The mothers of wealthy heiresses, often rejected by local society themselves, saw their daughters as a means to achieve their own dreams of grandeur. From childhood, they prepared their girls for a single goal: to marry a duke or earl without asking their own wishes. Love, affection, or shared interests were irrelevant in these deals, where titles and millions were at stake. The most famous victim of such ambitions was the young Consuelo Vanderbilt, whose marriage to the Duke of Marlborough became a symbol of this era. She was in love with someone else, but her mother, the iron-willed Alva, locked her daughter in her room and threatened to kill herself if she did not agree to the marriage. The girl, broken by her mother's psychological pressure and hysterics, was forced to obey, sacrificing her happiness. The morning of the wedding, which was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, turned into a real nightmare for the bride. She cried so much that her face swelled up, and the makeup artist had to apply a thick layer of powder to hide the traces of her hysterics. Hidden under a luxurious veil were eyes red from crying, full of despair and hopelessness in the face of the impending inevitability. The wedding dress was incredibly beautiful, but so heavy that the bride could hardly move without help. This outfit was a metaphor for her future life: luxurious, glamorous, but unbearably heavy and restricting her every movement. She walked down the aisle not as a happy bride, but as a victim being led to slaughter for the sake of her family's ambitions. The cream of society gathered in the church, eager to witness the triumph of the Vanderbilts' money and the Marlboroughs' ancient bloodline. None of the guests wanted to notice the bride's pallor or the cold detachment of the groom, who was also marrying solely for money. For the crowd, it was simply a magnificent show, a performance staged against a backdrop of white lilies and marble. After the ceremony, life began in the huge, cold Blenheim Palace, where there was no place for comfort and warmth. The young Duchess found herself in a foreign country, among people who looked down on her as a wallet that had bought her entry into their world. She had to learn hundreds of rules of etiquette, memorize the names of all her husband's ancestors, and give birth to heirs to justify the investment. Do you think preserving historical heritage justifies such sacrifices on the part of living people? In the next chapter, you will learn what women had to do to escape this hell. What I am about to reveal was forbidden to discuss in polite society under threat of exile. At that time, divorce was considered not just a legal procedure, but an indelible stain of shame that would follow a woman for the rest of her life. The church, society, and even her own family perceived the dissolution of marriage as a moral fall equal to a crime. A woman who decided to take this step effectively signed her own death warrant, voluntarily becoming a pariah. Divorce trials turned into dirty public spectacles, where the most intimate details of a person's life were put on display for all to see. Newspapers eagerly printed transcripts of the hearings, relishing every detail of infidelity, scandals, and domestic violence. The crowd read these reports over their morning coffee, condemning the woman for daring to air her dirty laundry in public. To obtain a divorce, it was necessary to prove physical infidelity or abuse, which required humiliating testimony from servants and detectives. Women had to stand before a court consisting exclusively of men and recount their suffering, meeting only cold, judgmental glances. Her every word was questioned, and her motives were interpreted as capriciousness or hysteria of a spoiled nature. Even if the court sided with the wife, victory had the bitter taste of complete social ostracism. The doors of houses where she had once been a welcome guest were now slammed shut in front of her forever, as if she were a contagious patient. Former friends crossed to the other side of the street, pretending to be engrossed in window shopping or adjusting their gloves. A divorced woman could not appear at official receptions, balls, or in the royal box at the opera. All that remained for her was the company of other outcasts or a life of seclusion behind the closed curtains of her home. She became a living widow, a woman without status, without protection, and without a future in the usual sense of the word. Many, unable to withstand the pressure and isolation, left for Europe, trying to find at least a modicum of freedom and understanding there. In Paris or on the Riviera, morals were a little freer, and entire colonies of American and English exiles formed there. But even there, the shadow of scandal haunted them, and the whispering behind their backs never ceased. Like this, if you admire the courage of women who are willing to go against the system for their own freedom. Guess how long it took to create an invisible front line right in the center of New York City? The opera during the Gilded Age was not just a temple of art, but a real battlefield where old money fought new money. The old aristocracy, the so-called Knickerbockers, owned boxes at the Academy of Music, the city's oldest and most prestigious theater. Having a box there was the highest mark of recognition, confirmation that your blood was blue enough and your money was old enough. But the number of seats was limited, and new millionaires such as the Vanderbilts and Morgans could not get in for any amount of money. They were denied the right to sit next to the descendants of the first settlers and were shown to their seats in the stalls. This was a public insult that the ambitious wives of industrialists could not forgive or leave unanswered. So the new money decided to build their own theater, one that would outshine the old Academy with its glitz and glamour. Thus, the Metropolitan Opera was born, a shining temple of wealth where the boxes were arranged so that their owners could be seen by all. It was an architectural challenge thrown in the face of the stuffy old society, a declaration of new power. On premiere nights, a veritable war of diamonds and velvet unfolded in the city. The ladies at both operas competed to see whose tiaras were taller, whose necklaces were more expensive, and whose dresses were more luxurious. They looked at each other through binoculars, not out of interest, but to assess their opponent's armament and find flaws. The Metropolitan Opera was like an exhibition of capitalist achievements, where every inch was covered in gold. Women sat in their boxes like precious stones in settings, displaying their husbands' wealth to the whole world. There was more light, more glitz, and more noise here than in the old dusty Academy. At the Academy of Music, on the other hand, there was an atmosphere of restrained arrogance and contempt for the nouveau riche. The ladies there wore family jewels, which may have been less impressive in size, but had a history spanning several generations. They pretended not to notice the existence of the new theater, even though they knew perfectly well that their era was coming to an end. The battle was not for life, but for death, and the weapons in it were invited stars and famous tenors. The Metropolitan lured the best singers with huge fees, leaving the old opera with second-rate casts. It was a blow to the most sensitive spot, the quality of art, which the old elite supposedly defended. Are you ready to find out what price this outward victory cost each woman in her personal life? In the next chapter, you will learn what was hidden behind their bedroom doors. Behind the walls of noisy ballrooms and opera houses lay a world of quiet, darkened rooms, permeated with the smell of medicine and lavender. Women who could not withstand the frantic pace of social life and constant pressure often found themselves locked in their own bedrooms. Doctors of the time diagnosed them with hysteria or nervous exhaustion, prescribing rest as the only treatment. The famous rest often turned into a real prison, where the patient was forbidden to read, write, or even think. Women had to lie in bed for weeks, staring at the ceiling or the patterns on the wallpaper, slowly going mad with boredom. They were given fatty foods and massages, but were deprived of the most important things: intellectual stimulation and lively conversation. The windows in such rooms were often covered with thick curtains so that excessive light would not excite the patient's nervous system. The dim light created an oppressive atmosphere in which the sense of time and reality was lost. The days merged into an endless gray streak, interrupted only by visits from the doctor and the arrival of the maid with a tray. Husbands rarely entered these rooms, preferring to live their active lives in offices and clubs. A sick wife became a burden, an uncomfortable reminder that the beautiful picture of the family had cracked. Her condition was attributed to female weakness, unwilling to see the real reasons. Lack of self-fulfillment and freedom. Many women in such conditions began to feel like heroines of Gothic novels, locked in a tower. Their creative energy, finding no outlet, turned inward, giving rise to anxiety, depression, and obsessive thoughts. They became shadows of themselves, pale ghosts gliding through the corridors of huge houses. This quiet tragedy took place in thousands of wealthy homes, remaining invisible to the outside world. What if I told you that there was not a single corner in these houses where one could truly be alone? The luxurious mansions of the Gilded Age were designed like complex mechanisms, where the lives of the masters were inextricably linked to those of the servants. Behind every door, behind every curtain, and in every corridor were invisible witnesses to all the family dramas. Footmen, maids, cooks, and butlers knew absolutely everything about their masters, from financial problems to secret love affairs. The servants moved silently around the house, using special staircases and hidden passages in the walls. They appeared in rooms as if out of thin air to stoke the fire in the fireplace or clean up spilled powder. This created the illusion of their absence, but in reality they were always nearby, absorbing every word and every glance. The mistress of the house could not even get dressed without help, standing in front of her maid in her underwear. This intimate closeness blurred the boundaries, making the maid the keeper of her mistress's most intimate secrets of body and soul. She saw the bruises that needed to be covered up and read the notes that needed to be burned. Conversations at the dinner table, conducted in the presence of the footmen, instantly became public knowledge. The servants discussed their masters with brutal candor, analyzing their quarrels, betrayals, and failures. In the basements and attics where the servants lived, an alternative history of the family was being written, often more truthful than the official one. Blackmail by former servants was a real threat to the reputation of any noble family of that time. A dismissed maid could sell her story to newspaper reporters who were happy to pay for juicy gossip from high society. Therefore, employers were often forced to tolerate negligent or insolent servants in order to keep their secrets safe. There was a whole network of information exchange between servants from different houses, a kind of underground telegraph. The Vanderbilt's butler could know about the Astors' plans before the Astors themselves announced them officially. Gossip was passed on through suppliers, coachmen, and laundresses, instantly spreading throughout the city. Do you think it is possible to maintain personal happiness when your life is under constant surveillance? In the next chapter, we will talk about how the walls of these aquariums themselves were crumbling. When the scandal died down and the doors of high society salons closed forever, the next act of tragedy often followed: financial ruin. Many dynasties were held together by their word and credit, and as soon as their reputation faltered, creditors began to demand repayment. The luxurious lifestyle, balls, and travels required enormous funds, and when the flow of money dried up, a cruel reckoning ensued. The scene for the finale was often an auction hall, or even the hall of their own home, where appraisers would come. Things that had been collected by generations, which held the warmth of hands and memories of happy days, were turned into nothing more than numbered lots. Paintings, statues, porcelain, and furniture were put on display for strangers, ready to buy someone else's past for a pittance. Women watched as the auctioneer's hammer methodically struck, taking away a part of their lives and history with each blow. The beloved piano on which their daughters had learned to play went to a stranger, and the family silver was bought up by dealers. It was like a public autopsy where the insides of the house were pulled out and weighed. Particularly painful was the sale of jewelry, which was often a woman's only personal property and her insurance for a rainy day. Necklaces given as wedding gifts and rings passed down from grandmothers disappeared into the safes of moneylenders and jewelers. Instead of sparkling stones, only velvet emptiness and a bitter sense of loss remained in the boxes. After selling off their property, families were often forced to leave their mansions, which had become too expensive to maintain. Moving to a modest apartment or hotel was not just a change of address, but a symbol of falling to the bottom of society. Passing by their former homes, they saw unfamiliar lights and silhouettes in the windows, which caused them unbearable pain. Men in such situations often found solace in alcohol or ran away altogether, unable to bear the shame of bankruptcy. The entire burden of organizing a new life, dealing with creditors, and caring for children fell on the shoulders of women. They had to learn to save every penny, mend old dresses, and deny themselves everything they had been accustomed to since childhood. The collapse of the material world sometimes became the beginning of a spiritual rebirth, although the path was strewn with thorns. In the shadow of the glamorous mistresses of the mansions, there were often inconspicuous figures whose fate was perhaps the most tragic. These were the poor relatives, unmarried aunts, cousins, or widowed sisters who had no means of their own. They lived by the grace of their wealthy relatives, serving as unpaid companions, nannies, or secretaries. Their position was ambiguous. On the one hand, they were members of the family and sat at the same table, but on the other, they were freeloaders. They were reminded of their dependence with every sidelong glance, every sigh about unnecessary expenses. They had to be endlessly grateful for a roof over their heads and food, paying for it with a complete renunciation of their own will. Such women often dressed in their mistresses' remade dresses, which had long gone out of fashion but were still too good for servants. Their wardrobe was dominated by gray and brown tones, colors of invisibility and humility, befitting their status. They did not wear expensive jewelry, only modest brooches or medallions with portraits of deceased parents. They were given rooms on the upper floors, often next to the children's rooms or the servants' quarters, which were small and cold. In winter, there were drafts, and in summer, it was stuffy, but complaining was considered the height of ingratitude. It was their refuge, the only place where they could take off their masks of obsequiousness and just be themselves. Their duties included entertaining bored guests, looking after children, walking dogs, and running errands. They were fill-ins for any gap. If there was an odd number of guests at a dinner party, they would call on their poor cousin. If someone fell ill and needed to be watched over at night, that also became their task. The personal lives of such women were taboo. It was believed that their time had passed or that they were simply not meant for marriage. Any attempts to start a romance were suppressed by the family, who did not want to lose a free and convenient helper. They grew old watching the happiness of others, babysitting other people's grandchildren, and mourning their unfulfilled dreams. Poor relatives were the invisible foundation of many great houses, which no one remembered until it disappeared. The morals of the Victorian and Gilded Ages were riddled with hypocrisy, especially when it came to matters of fidelity. There were completely different codes of conduct for men and women, written not on paper but in people's minds. Men were forgiven for many things, keeping mistresses, visiting dubious establishments, and even having children out of wedlock, as long as it was not too widely publicized. High society turned a blind eye to male infidelity, considering it an inevitable evil or even a sign of masculinity. Wives had to endure, pretend not to notice, and save face for the sake of the family and children. A scandal only arose if a man violated external propriety and put his wife in an awkward position in public. For a woman, however, any hint of infidelity was like a death sentence, with no possibility of appeal. Even innocent flirting, a conversation with a gentleman that lasted too long, or a ride in a carriage together could ruin her reputation forever. Society was ruthless towards fallen women from its circle, banishing them with the cruelty of the medieval Inquisition. If a wife's infidelity became public knowledge, her husband had every right, and even a duty, to file for divorce and deprive her of everything. He remained a victim in the eyes of the world, a man whose honor had been tarnished and received universal sympathy. The woman, on the other hand, lost her children, her home, her livelihood, and the opportunity to appear in decent society. There was even a geographical exile for guilty wives. They were sent to remote country estates or abroad. There they lived out their lives in isolation, far from the glamour of the capitals, receiving a meager allowance from their husbands. Their names were erased from family chronicles and their portraits were taken down from the walls and sent to the attic. The story of these broken lives reminds us how unfair a world built on false rules can be. Everything comes to an end, and the glittering Gilded Age was no exception, fading away under the blows of time and history. The introduction of income tax, World War I, and the Great Depression dealt a fatal blow to the old way of life. Huge fortunes melted away. The maintenance of palaces became an unbearable burden, and armies of servants fled to factories. The mansions on Fifth Avenue, once aglow with the lights of balls, now stood dark and cold, awaiting their fate. Their owners died or moved to more modest apartments, leaving behind the echoes of former grandeur. The ballrooms where the Vanderbilts and Astors had danced waltzes were now drafty and musty. Many of these architectural masterpieces were ruthlessly demolished to make way for faceless skyscrapers and offices. Under the blows of jackhammers, marble crumbled, dust flew from gilded moldings, and crystal chandeliers fell onto the parquet floor. It was the physical destruction of memory, the erasure of traces of an entire civilization that had seemed eternal. The women who once ruled this world had become old women living on memories of their past youth. They sorted through yellowed photographs, old invitations, and fans, trying to hold on to the slipping away of time. Their world, built on rules, etiquette, and exclusivity, proved fragile and unviable in the face of change. The new generations no longer understood the significance of the list of 400 and laughed at their grandmother's primness. To the youth of the jazz era, corsets, calling cards, and complex courtship rituals seemed like ridiculous relics of the past. The Gilded Age became history, leaving behind only beautiful legends and museum exhibits. We have come a long way through the corridors of time, looking behind the scenes of one of the most brilliant and dramatic eras in history. We have seen that behind the outward splendor of balls and receptions lay real human dramas, broken destinies, and lonely hearts. The wealth and status that so many sought often proved to be a heavy burden, crushing everything that was alive and sincere. These stories teach us that the true price of a beautiful life can be unbearably high, and that a gilded cage is still a cage, even if it is strewn with diamonds. The women of the Gilded Age and the late Victorian period were not just decorations in living rooms, but living people who suffered, loved, and sought their place in a cruel world of conventions. What other secrets of the past would you like to uncover with us? Write in the comments about the topics that interest you most, and we will definitely make new videos about them. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to continue this fascinating journey into history.